What if the words he says to you aren't just careless slips, but quiet warnings? What if behind every "you're too sensitive" or "no one else will love you like I do" is not love at all, but control, fear, and emotional erosion? Sometimes the most dangerous red flags aren't in what he does, they're hidden in what he says. And the sooner you learn to hear them, the sooner you can save yourself from a slow and silent heartbreak. When a man speaks, the words he chooses are not just a means to communicate, but often a direct reflection of his internal emotional landscape. Every phrase, every sentence carries within it an energy, a silent map to his fears, his needs, and his emotional maturity. Words can be windows into someone's inner world. They expose beliefs, unresolved wounds, and the depth or shallowness of one's ability to love and respect. And if a man consistently uses phrases that belittle, confuse, or diminish you, it is not simply poor communication. It is a manifestation of deeper emotional misalignment. When someone repeatedly says things that strike at your core, it isn't just about what's being said, it's about why it's being said. His words could be a defense, a wall built around vulnerability, or they could be a mask, a clever disguise worn to conceal control, insecurity, or even emotional immaturity. A man who says you're too sensitive is not merely commenting on your reactions. He is deflecting responsibility for the impact of his words or actions. He is asking you to feel less, to adjust yourself for his comfort, and that phrase doesn't come from a place of love. It comes from a place of avoidance. He is avoiding the discomfort of seeing how his behavior affects others. Rather than reflecting and taking accountability, he would rather reshape you than face himself. That tells you much more about where he is emotionally than it does about you. His emotional world might be closed, afraid of intimacy, or resistant to accountability. When a man says, "You'll never find someone better than me," it is not affection speaking. It is fear. It's a fear of being left, of being irrelevant, of not being good enough. But instead of working through that fear in a healthy way, he wields it as a weapon. He projects that fear onto you in the form of control. This language is emotionally manipulative and suggests an internal belief that love is not shared, but possessed. That belief often arises from early wounds, from a self-PMU built on dominance rather than connection. This kind of language reveals an emotional world that thrives on comparison, insecurity, and conditional acceptance. Similarly, if he says, "You're nothing without me," he's not speaking truth. He's speaking from a deep fracture in his sense of self. People who use such phrases often carry unresolved feelings of inadequacy. Rather than heal those wounds, they build emotional cages for others. It is not love that motivates such words. It is the need to feel powerful in a world where they themselves feel powerless. The words point to a man who has not learned to value partnership, but has only learned to seek control to feel safe. This reveals an emotional world full of fear, disconnected from true vulnerability or shared intimacy. When we listen not just to the words, but to the emotional place they come from, we begin to understand what's really happening in our relationships. A man's words, especially in repeated patterns, offer more than just communication. They are emotional fingerprints, clues to the kind of relationship he is capable of creating. And when those clues point to harm, to control, or to emotional absence, they should not be ignored. Language holds immense power, and when used repeatedly in a relationship, it begins to shape not just conversations, but identities. When a man uses words as a tool of control, it often happens subtly, almost invisibly at first. These are not always loud, angry declarations. Often they are quiet corrections, casual dismissals, or joking criticisms that slowly start to seep into the mind of the listener. Over time, the repetition of invalidating language begins to erode a woman's self-esteem. It becomes a quiet background noise that constantly questions her worth, her feelings, and even her perceptions of reality. It sounds like you're overthinking again, or you always make things a bigger deal than they are. While these phrases may seem harmless in isolation, their cumulative effect is profound. They cause confusion, self-doubt, and a constant need for external validation. Control in relationships does not always show up through physical dominance or open threats. More often, it hides in the way language is used to create emotional imbalance. A man who repeatedly positions himself as the rational one and labels your responses as irrational is not engaging in open communication. He's establishing a power hierarchy. When your emotional experiences are consistently invalidated, you may begin to question if what you feel is even real. And this is not accidental. It's a subtle form of manipulation where the goal is not mutual understanding but emotional advantage. Over time, it conditions the other person to suppress their instincts, silence their voice, and prioritize the comfort of the one who holds verbal power. Sometimes, control shows up through constant correction. A man might say, "That's not what I meant," or "You're twisting my words," anytime you try to hold him accountable for something he said. This leads to emotional exhaustion because you are constantly put in a position where your understanding of a situation is being challenged. It becomes a cycle where you're not only defending your feelings, but also trying to prove that your interpretation of events is valid. This is not about clarity, it's about disarming your ability to respond. Over time, this creates emotional confusion and weakens your ability to trust yourself. Words used in this way also foster dependence. A man might say things like, "I'm the only one who really gets you," or "No one else would put up with you." These phrases are designed to isolate. They draw you into a closed system where his approval becomes the only source of affirmation. He becomes the sole judge of your value. And this dependency makes it much harder to leave, even when things feel toxic. The control is no longer just external. It becomes internalized. You begin to see yourself through the lens he's created for you, one that is shaped by limitations, not truth. When the language becomes a pattern of minimization, dismissal, or confusion, it is not a communication issue, it's a control dynamic. The words are chosen to dominate emotional space, to frame one person's reality as the truth, and to make the other person feel small, reactive, or broken. And though it may all be hidden under the surface of everyday conversation, its effects are deeply damaging. Healthy love is built on the foundation of emotional safety. It is not just about shared interests, attraction, or even time spent together. It is about how safe you feel to be your full self in someone's presence. When a man uses words that are laced with blame, criticism, or possessiveness, he creates an atmosphere where love cannot breathe. Love requires space to grow, space for emotions to be heard, for mistakes to be made without fear, and for vulnerability to be honored. If that space is replaced with fear, tension, or anxiety, then love becomes something you must tiptoe around rather than lean into. Emotional safety is what allows two people to express their truths without being punished for them. It's what allows connection to deepen over time instead of erode. When a man says things like, "You made me do this," or "This is your fault," he is not just expressing anger. He is shifting responsibility for his actions onto you. In doing so, he makes you the guardian of his behavior. This creates a dynamic where you are constantly walking on eggshells, trying to avoid setting him off, trying to manage his mood so that he doesn't react in harmful ways. This is not partnership, it is emotional imbalance. A relationship like this stops being about shared growth and starts becoming a system where one person's peace depends entirely on the other's sacrifice. And in such a system, love loses its integrity. Criticism is another weapon that erodes emotional safety. It may come in the form of seemingly innocent comments. "You should dress better," "You don't know how to talk to people," or "Why can't you be more like?" These comments might be disguised as advice, but they chip away at your confidence little by little. When someone constantly highlights your flaws without recognizing your strengths, they are not loving you, they are reshaping you into something more acceptable to them. A loving relationship does not require you to shrink, mold, or perform. It invites you to expand into the full expression of who you are. If your partner's words make you feel inadequate more often than empowered, then the emotional environment is not nurturing, it's depleting. Possessiveness too wears the mask of care. A man might say, I just worry about you, or I can't stand the thought of you talking to other guys. On the surface, these words may seem romantic, even flattering, but underneath they often carry the weight of insecurity and control. When your freedom is questioned, your friendships doubted, or your independence challenged, that is not love. It is fear disguised as affection. A healthy relationship honors individuality. It doesn't view your independence as a threat. It sees it as a strength. Emotional safety is not negotiable. It is not a bonus in a relationship. It is the foundation. Without it, you are forced to become someone else just to keep the peace. You learn to mute your voice, minimize your feelings, and accept behavior that should never be normalized. And the more you adjust yourself to survive, the further you drift from your own truth. Self-respect is the anchor that holds you steady when emotions try to pull you in every direction. In relationships, especially ones where words turn into weapons, there comes a moment when you must decide which matters more, being chosen by someone else or choosing yourself. When a man repeatedly speaks in ways that degrade, control, or confuse you, the temptation to stay often comes from a place of emotional attachment. You remember the good moments, the promises, the soft beginnings. But no matter how much you care, your self-worth cannot be sacrificed at the altar of someone else's dysfunction. The way you allow someone to speak to you is not just about them. It is a reflection of what you believe you deserve. And walking away is not a failure. It is a decision made from clarity and courage. Too often love is misunderstood as endurance. You are told to be patient, to wait for change, to prove your loyalty. But if patience comes at the cost of your dignity, it is no longer a virtue. It becomes self-abandonment. There is no amount of love that can fix a person who doesn't believe their words have consequences. There is no devotion strong enough to heal someone who uses emotional harm as a way to feel powerful. When you walk away from a man who says things that crush your spirit, you are not giving up on him. You are refusing to give up on yourself. Choosing yourself means honoring your emotional reality. If your body feels tense when he speaks, if your heart beats faster in defense rather than delight, if your voice trembles not from vulnerability but fear, those are signs that your emotional safety is compromised. Often we override these signals. We tell ourselves we're overreacting, we minimize the pain, or we convince ourselves that things will get better with time. But true healing never begins in a place where pain is normalized. You cannot grow in an environment that demands your silence in exchange for temporary peace. Walking away is not about anger or punishment. It is about reclaiming your space, emotionally, mentally, and spiritually. It's important to understand that emotional abuse does not always leave visible scars. It's the quiet erosion of your joy, your spark, your sense of self. It's the inner voice that starts to whisper, maybe I am too much, or maybe I do deserve this. That voice was not born from truth, it was trained by repetition. And the only way to silence it is to remove yourself from the environment that taught it. Self-respect is not loud, and it doesn't always come with speeches or ultimatums. Sometimes it's the quiet act of walking away from a conversation, choosing not to respond, or slowly creating distance. Each step is a statement, I will no longer let this define me. To love yourself in the face of disrespect is one of the hardest and most vital things you can do. It means prioritizing your peace over your attachment. It means trusting that being alone is far better than being half-loved. And it means believing, even when it's hard, that you are worthy of words that build, not break. Healing always begins with awareness. Before any change can happen, before any transformation can take root, there must be a clear and honest recognition of what is actually happening. So often in unhealthy relationships, especially those clouded by emotional manipulation or control, the truth becomes blurry. You begin to question your instincts, your feelings, even your memories. Harmful patterns get dismissed as misunderstandings, and hurtful words are excused as temporary anger or stress. But the moment you allow yourself to truly see, to notice the way his words make you feel, to acknowledge how your spirit is slowly dimming, that is the moment something inside you begins to shift. Recognition does not always come in loud moments. Sometimes it's the silence after a conversation when your heart feels heavy. Sometimes it's the way you hesitate to speak freely, already predicting how your words will be twisted. Sometimes it's a simple question echoing in your mind. Why do I feel smaller every time I talk to him? These quiet moments matter. They are the signals from within, gently urging you to stop overlooking the pain. It takes courage to see things as they are rather than how you wish them to be. But in that clarity, healing finds its first breath. The language used in a relationship reflects deeper dynamics. When a man repeatedly uses phrases that make you feel inadequate, guilty, or trapped, he is creating an emotional environment that does not support growth. Recognizing this is not about assigning blame, it's about understanding the impact. It's about noticing that even if you care deeply, love cannot be the reason you stay in a space where your truth is constantly denied. Awareness is not judgment, it is simply the light that reveals what has been hiding in the shadows. Once you begin to see the pattern, you can no longer pretend it's isolated. The words, the tone, the reactions, they start to form a picture, and that picture shows you whether you are being nurtured or slowly broken. Many people fear recognition because it demands change. It brings discomfort, and with it, responsibility. Once you see, you can't unsee. And with that truth comes a choice to either continue down the same path with the same pain or to choose something different, something unfamiliar but honest. Healing requires this moment of reckoning. It is not about changing the other person. It is about choosing to respond differently, perhaps for the first time. The moment you recognize what is wrong is also the moment you reconnect with your own power. You begin to trust your inner signals again. You begin to listen to the part of you that has been whispering, this isn't right. That inner voice, the one that you may have silenced for the sake of peace or love, becomes louder. And with every bit of truth you allow yourself to acknowledge, you move closer to healing. It doesn't happen all at once. It unfolds with each decision to believe your experience, to honor your emotions, and to take the steps, however small, toward emotional freedom. Recognition is the first act of love you give to yourself. It's the beginning of reclaiming the life, the voice, and the peace that were never meant to be compromised. When a man speaks in ways that belittle, control, or manipulate you, it is not just about his words. It's about the emotional landscape behind them. These patterns reveal more than just poor communication. They expose a deep misalignment in values, respect, and emotional maturity. No matter how strong the attachment, how deep the history, or how hopeful the potential, your self-worth must never be the price you pay for love. You deserve a relationship where your voice is heard, your feelings are honored, and your presence is valued, not questioned, minimized, or reshaped. Walking away is not weakness, it is wisdom. It is the most courageous act of self-respect you can take when love begins to feel like survival. The moment you recognize what hurts you is the same moment you give yourself permission to heal, and healing is where true love, starting with the love you give to yourself, begins again.